somebody points a problem at a particular part of the funnel, growth is really responsible for building the systems that are needed to identify those gaps and then plug the holes.
Product of growth is essentially the full go-to-market motion between both marketing and sales and how that functions.
We just closed a merger with another competitor of ours. We are now the first AI-powered revenue effectiveness platform that is specifically designed for field selling organizations. Combined, we unite content, readiness, collaboration, and intelligence, which allows us to empower distributed sales, marketing, channel, enablement teams to all sell smarter, faster.
You can't replace marketing, right? Like, you
treat them the same.
Source of truth for the medtech industry.
Coexists with the prophets.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the medtech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the $90 billion company. They had help up high, a lot of things.
State of medtech with your host, Omar M. Khatib.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show. As you guys know, through our agency, Marketing Craft, but also more importantly, the State of MedTech, we like to bring a lot of people who are, in my opinion, like thought leaders and experts in their relative area when it comes to go-to-market, marketing, and sales, but more importantly, like outside of our industry. Our industry is really behind it in a lot of things. And so we use the show as a way to sort of introduce those new concepts and more importantly, those platforms. One of the partners we have this show that we've been a partner with for some time now is Showpad, which we'll get into in a moment. But through Showpad, I've developed a great relationship with a marketer who I have a lot of respect for, and that's Kang, who's the director of growth marketing. And so in this episode, we kind of want to talk about sort of what does modern marketing look like? How does it work within the sales team? And how do you start applying things like AI and UX and data to essentially make this all work? And so that way we can get our industry more into the 21st century of marketing. So Moon, thank you so much for joining. It's great to finally see you and finally do this, man. I know we've been wanting to do this for some time, so glad it's finally happening.
Yeah, glad to be here. I know you and I talk about marketing and we end up chatting for hours and hours, and you've been talking about doing an episode, so glad to be here.
I know, yeah, seriously. So some of those talks that we have offline, I always think, I'm like, man, we should have recorded that, but I'm glad we're doing it now. So, but before we kind of jump into the topics today, maybe give us a little bit of background as to what does it mean when you're like the director of growth marketing, and more importantly, like who Showpad is. I know Showpad went through some really exciting changes recently, so maybe kind of give us a little background on yourself and the company, and we'll dive into it from there.
Sure, yeah. Director of growth. Growth has turned into this like mishmash of, yeah. So, what I like to say is like, somebody points a problem at a particular part of the funnel and they tell you to fix it. And growth is really responsible for building the systems that are needed to identify those gaps and then plug the holes. So growth I feel really lucky to be in a growth role just because I'm not stuck at the top of the funnel. I'm not stuck handing off leads. I'm not stuck hoping leads turn into opportunities and opportunities close. I oversee the whole thing. So we talk about, or you mentioned user experience, and we'll talk about that a little later, but growth allows me to think about user experience across the entire buying funnel or the buyer funnel. And I think that's something that not a lot of marketers have a chance to think about. So yeah, that's kind of like what growth is here at Showpad, and feel very fortunate to have my hands up and down the marketing and sales funnel.
Yeah, and I'm happy you mentioned that, by the way, because I think like, I personally feel like there was a time like, I think like old traditional marketing where you had like the roles divided up where somebody's doing copy, somebody's doing brand, somebody's doing this and that. And I think in some places it works, but especially in the digital age with like more modern go-to-market strategies, I think it's more important for somebody to really own the full thing, because then you have a much deeper understanding of the system, right? And I think as like, if you think about like growth or marketing as essentially like being an architect or engineer, it becomes a lot easier to identify the problems and constraints and fix the overall system so it runs more efficiently. Versus if you're just focused on one very specific area, you don't know if you change certain things within that area, the downstream effects that it's going to have in other areas of the funnel and marketing and sales. And so I really love that you kind of explain growth in that sense.
Totally. Yeah, that lends to the user experience. It's like if one person is doing one thing and the other doesn't realize what the other person or the other hand is doing, then you have a disconnected experience, which again creates a poor experience, bad user experience, creates stall moments, and stall moments, deal stall, and that's not good for anybody.
Absolutely. And I think maybe an interesting way to think about it, like in our industry, product management or product managers essentially have all this authority and responsibility around a product, not just on the development of it, the R&D, but also the pricing of it, to an extent, marketing and and how you sell and everything. And maybe growth. A great way to look at it is that the product of growth is essentially the full go-to-market motion between both marketing and sales and how that functions. Would you agree with that?
Totally. Yeah, I think I have a ton of respect for product managers, product marketing managers. I'm not technical enough and I don't think I would do well in product, but it always fascinates me. Like, how are you building the product roadmap? How are you developing it? How are you understanding what's going on in the market to develop that product roadmap? And so, growth, again, feel very fortunate to have enough of a seat in that room to understand what's going on there so that I can get a head start on what growth systems or architecture that I can build to start marketing in that area.
Now, tell everybody what is Showpad today?
Yeah. So Showpad, we're going through a really exciting time. We just closed a merger with another competitor of ours, Big Team Can. So between the two companies, we are now the first AI-powered revenue effectiveness platform that is specifically designed for field selling organizations. Our platforms combined, we unite content, readiness, collaboration, and intelligence, which allows us to empower distributed sales, marketing, channel, enablement teams to all sell smarter, faster, and together. So we're really excited about the merger. I think it just made sense. We go after kind of the same ICP, the ideal customer profile, the same industries. We have really complementary products. Their AI tool is extremely complementary to our AI analytics, our content tool. So really exciting time right now. We just closed that merger and we're starting to really hit the road running. And so, yeah, exciting.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I love the way that you put it about being around like revenue effectiveness. And I think that the only way that you can have like true revenue effectiveness is if you have like a unified strategy both between marketing and sales and not have like disparate silos. And so I think part of that is translating a lot of the strategy and content and tools that are developed like in-house at HQ and making sure that the sellers out in the field have that at their disposal. And more importantly, they know what to use when. And I think the other side of it is that, and I think this is where in the medical device industry they can really improve, is that for the longest time, medical device was kind of like a lone wolf industry. You bring on a bunch of sellers, you let them go to market, and then like whoever makes quota, great, and other people, if they don't, then like you place them. And I think that because of the complexity of the sales, you can't just do that anymore. And so now, especially as companies are looking to scale from, let's say, 3 to 5 sellers to 10 to 15 to 20, you have to have more of a unified approach about how do you scale that, right? And I think the other side of it is that you can't scale a system that you're not necessarily managing, and you can't scale a complex system. And I feel like, a platform like Showpad, which is one of the reasons why I really wanted you guys as a partner, really helps with doing that.
Yeah, totally. And I think one of the reasons why I love being here is the impact that we bring to organization is super clear. It's not just us patting ourselves in the back. There's plenty of third-party research and statistics out there that show the impact of connecting marketing, sales, enablement, and bringing the human side of field selling with the intelligence that's needed. Like you said, like how do all these things work together and what's going on in the deal cycle? And so with our two companies combined here, this like combined co, as we call it, it's just beyond the qualitative. We talk about sales, marketing, working together, shaking hands, but this actually, like the better collaboration, being able to act now more decisively, the continuous training that is provided has impact from a quantitative standpoint. So just to rattle off a couple numbers, like G2, I'm sure you're aware of G2 Crowd, they review software, etc. They've cited from unbiased research that 49% higher win rates when sales, marketing, and enablement all work together for that collaboration to act decisively and have continuous just-in-time training for those sellers. Salesforce themselves, a CRM giant, they also cite this type of collaboration leads to a 40% faster onboarding. And then one last thing I'm going to throw at you, Forrester, the analyst firm, cites a 30% higher quota attainment. So imagine now you're a sales leader today. You're building your organization, you're looking to scale. Maybe you just got your Series B, Series C, and now you need to scale. What do most leaders do? They just blow up their sales team. They say 2x, 3x the sales org. What you don't realize is there's onboarding time, there's ramp time, and the win rates, they're not going to hit the same win rates as your winners already on your team. And so now imagine as you grow your team, you're onboarding 40% faster. The rest of your team is 30% higher, getting higher quota attainment. And then everybody across the board is winning 49% more. And now you're building this winning locker room mentality together and scaling with efficiency. And so that is why I'm super excited to be here at this moment with the merger, but also just as a marketer, I'm super bullish on being able to use the tool that I can market as a marketer to marketers to say, hey, I know exactly what you're going through. You're not in the business of generating leads or impressions or clicks anymore. It's not even about the marketing qualified lead anymore. It's not even about the meetings that you get to book. It's how much pipeline can you close? And so marketers are asked to do even more, and that comes with tighter collaboration with the sales, and it's absolutely critical.
Yeah, I love the way you put that. And again, I think like the most important thing is to understand that, when you think about the function of scaling, right? Scaling outcomes and a team and everything, part of that is just timelines, right? And so like if it takes, sometimes on average in our industry, like 2 to 3 months, that's like sort of a good timeline for a new seller to get on board and get trained and everything. Like you're behind already a quarter, right?
Mhm.
And and there's the other thing that a lot of sales leaders don't take into effect is like there's like like compounding can work like in a positive way for you, but also it can work negatively for you. And so if you start thinking about this as you grow a sales team, an organization, you have compounding that's working against you, that's going to also work against like your pipeline. And then I think this is how, at the end of a quarter, a lot of deal reps or when they review deals, it feels a lot more like reporting the weather than an actual like objective review of like what deals are more likely to close. And more importantly, like what can we learn from the kind of deals that we're going after? Like what's our true ideal customer profile? Like it can't be just somebody who's interested in the technology. There has to be something more tangible there. And I don't think that that's being accomplished because there's not a system of how do we translate like the in-house strategy and content out to our field sellers, and then how do we actually keep track of what's working, what's not, so that we get as close to a duplicating system as possible in terms of like what's being shared and done like at first contact, during a demo, et cetera, so on and so forth. Versus right now, I feel like sellers sometimes they're given this like, mixed bag of tools and they get to pick and choose when to use, at what point, which is part of selling, but it shouldn't be that, that open-ended, because you can't figure out what's going to work and what's going to scale. It might take you 2-3 years.
Yeah. I mean, field selling just by itself is probably the most complex, demanding, and like difficult part of the commercial engine. And now to give them, you know, disparate tools that don't speak to each other, telling them to go search for something like, here's AI, ask the AI. But it's like, what do you even ask the thing? And because the AI tool that a lot of these companies have isn't connected to the right context or right database of things to search for, doesn't matter what you ask the AI, it doesn't have the source of truth. And so field sellers, I think it just like that role in itself is already at a disadvantage because it's so complex. And now you're already, asking them to do all the other things that sellers that sit maybe in an office do with the CRM, the voice recording, the meeting recording, all that stuff that's already taking the notes automatically for them. You're asking them to do even more and do what technology is doing for them with just the human capacity. It's just very difficult. Yeah. Like there are so many tools out there, but again, the fact that Showpad is a one-stop shop, like an all-in-one tool, just really gives us a bit of that edge. Obviously, I'm biased because I'm here, but just knowing myself and knowing you and all the things that we talk about through using AI and custom GPTs, you and I both know the output's only as good as the input. And the input is really the context. And so imagine opening up a brand new instance of GPT, brand new account, and asking it, hey, what do I need to do tomorrow for my workout? Zero context. It's not going to know who you are, what you're about, what your goals are, what gym you even go to, what equipment you have. And so now you're getting false positives. And a lot of companies and a lot of people are taking these tools and thinking like, hey, it's successful. It's being used X amount of times. Sellers are using it X amount of times. They're using this information to go and have conversations, not realizing you have to feed that information back to your tool and say, hey, I said this, it didn't work out, but that's not being happened, or that's not happening right now.
When you think about like the new function of marketing in terms of what their real responsibilities are and their skill set, like what kind of comes to mind for you?
Two things. One is generating demand. think marketers still, first and foremost, like it's just marketing 101. Like you have to market the product, the company, your product positioning, your values. Like who are you and what do you stand for? I think that is still very, very important. Over the years, a lot of marketers have lost that. I think they pat themselves on the back because they now get visibility. They're in the room with CROs that talk about bookings or ARR or like revenue. And they think, oh, yeah, I'm in the room and I should be talking about pipeline too. But there's no amount of pipeline you're going to generate without generating demand and awareness for your organization. And so, first and foremost, when I think marketing, it's demand generation. Then, in an ideal world, as you generate the demand, you also need to capture it, right? It's almost like lobbing a baseball really high up in the air. You got to kind of jog over to where it's going to land and catch that. So, in a vacuum, let's say I start to market myself, moon marketing, my own agency, let's say. Then I need to capture that. Maybe Google search is a good example. I start to look for how many people search for moon marketing and I capture that demand that I've created. Again, in the vacuum, I'm the one that created that brand name, that agency name. I'm the one that marketed it. So whatever demand comes in the door that I catch is likely the one that I created. So it's the 1-2 punch of creating the demand and then being ready to capture it on the other end.
I'm happy you mentioned that too. I mean, shout out to my good friend Chris Walker, who kind of like was really talking like heavily about this stuff many years ago, who actually came from devices. But I think it's important for marketers in at least in Medtech to understand like those are two very different things, which is like what actually generated demand, which could have been like a podcast, a conference, a white paper, all these things, and what's capturing it. And a lot of times they forget that, and a lot of their bias ends up going towards what's capturing the demand, because a lot of attribution software essentially is, biased towards like what's capturing the demand. And then they pour, and usually, at least in our space, a lot of times it ends up being like paid search. And it's like, okay, let's put more money in paid search. And you put more money into paid search. And like you end up overspending this budget. And at the end of the year, you don't have much to show for, I was thinking about this the other day where in our society, like being illiterate is like a big problem, right? Illiteracy is a really big problem. But in numeracy, like not understanding some like basics of like statistics and data, you can get by, being innumerate and saying like, oh, I'm just not a math person. But I feel like it's so important, especially as a marketer, to actually have some like baseline, like numeracy or understanding of like how data and statistics should work, and then to actually say like, yeah, this is actually somewhat significant statistically that like we should be investing in here or there. But you can't do that if you put it all together and say, okay, let's just focus on what's being captured as demand,
Yeah. Yeah. I recently did an AMA for demand generation, and people asked about like the hard skills and the soft skills of becoming a marketing leader. I think absolute mission critical skill to have is data analysis. Like we have so much data now that the era of collecting data, back in the Facebook days, and maybe Facebook's still around, but maybe in like the early 2011, the name of the game was collect data at all costs. It was like collect every amount of data you can. We associated unique anonymous IDs to any user, and then we tracked their behavior on our website, and then we aggregated into cohorts, and then we called them lookalike audiences. It was just collect data.
I remember those days.
Yeah. Now it's like we have data up the wazoo. We have too much data to even consume. Now, what do we do with this? What is this actually telling us? What is this informing us? And so as a marketer, like you have to understand that there is a time and place to generate 1 million impressions, right? If you're going through a merger and you have a new brand messaging and positioning, 1 million impressions could be a good thing. I'm going to always double click to say of the 1 million, how many of those came from our ICP? Of the 1 million, how many came from, let's say, weather.com versus linkedin.com versus, let's call it like salesenablement.com. Those things all matter, right? And without the data literacy or like the data analysis skill to take raw data, understand enough to say, I'm going to break out this 1 million impression into these core buckets because that's what matters, and be able to take the ones and zeros into words, narratives, and translate that to the right audience. You cannot survive as a marketer in 2025 anymore. Like the days of having a data analyst person that sits on a different team, those are over. Marketers are not point solutions anymore. They're like a platform play. You got to be able to play in multiple fields. And part of that, having disparate, marketing tactics and programs going on is taking raw data, understanding what it means, turning it into insights, and then delivering the insights to the C-suite, to your leader, to your individual contributors, and the rest of the organization. That is like absolutely mission critical as a marketer.
I agree. And and especially now it's easier than ever to use, whether it's like Grok or ChatGPT or Gemini, just to sort of get some help in terms of like analyzing the data. The other side of it is that, like, especially for like a lot of early stage companies, they just don't have the amount of data or traffic to sort of make sense of it. And so I think that's the other thing, is that marketers also have to ask like very difficult questions of like, okay, like, of the data that we currently have, like, is there enough volume here for us to actually make a decision, or we have to make more of a qualitative analysis to say like, okay, like, we're seeing the trend of traffic or impressions or whatever it might be start to go up, but we still have to go on a case by case basis. We just don't have enough data at that point. And I think that's the most important thing, is that I feel like during that era of like collect as much data as possible, marketers kind of got like data drunk on just like showing like all these numbers to like their boards. And the problem with that is that they didn't actually provide the narrative or interpretation of that. And so when you do that, the only thing that ends up happening is that the numbers are never going to be enough, and they need to be going up and to the right at all times. And, and I feel like a lot of marketers like lost that responsibility and authority in the C-suite. And this is why, like, I think sometimes depending on the industry or even the company, marketing isn't the amount of leverage or influence they should have is actually like not there because of that.
Yeah, I feel very lucky and fortunate that I wasn't a marketer at an organization that was solely responsible for generating leads. Like, to me, ever since I started my career, it was always about activation. And it's like, you have all these people in your CRM, you have all these email addresses, doesn't matter who they are for now. How many are you going to activate into dollars? It was like conversion, direct to consumer. And from there, even B2B. It's like, hey, I don't care if you generate 5 leads for me, as long as they turn into $1 million in revenue. Because the one could be, let's say, American Airlines, and they buy software for $1 million. Doesn't matter if you got the one lead or hit your number of 50 leads in that 1 month. What really matters is who's signing the contract at the end of the day.
I was going to say, this is probably like a good segue into talks about it offline a little bit, about this concept of like the AI sandwich method. Maybe you can kind of walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah. AI, I think just because AI is being thrown around so much, like ChatGPT, the consumer GPT products are so available. I just see a lot of people using it like Google. It's like, why are you even bothering with that, right? Like, they say it uses several gallons of water to answer a question. It's like, that's terrible that you just asked it, what's the weather and what should you wear? The AI sandwich method for me is using AI to get you started on a concept. So let's just take my role, for example, as a growth marketer. If I have a campaign that I need to run, I know several core pieces that I need. One is, what is the market saying? So I need to do some market research. 2, I need to understand what's our product today and what is the product roadmap. And then I need to understand what are some of the quantitative goals that I have, like pipeline numbers or revenue goals that I need to hit for this campaign, and then back into a budget. So I know all these like core things that I need to have. The sandwich method says, as a leader, understanding, having gained the experiences I've gained, taking all these things and put it into AI, say, here's the strategy that I need, lay it out in a concise brief that I can fill in a little bit later. The AI spits out for me a template that says, here are the categories that you need to fill out. And the AI can't do that part. Like, the AI can build the framework for me, but the AI cannot fill in the middle pieces, which is, how do we go to market? What's the message we say to our audience? Like, people can say that, yes, AI can write the headline copy, but the human needs to be there as more than a last mile editor and make sure that it aligns to your company's positioning, value proposition, everything. And so the sandwich method, again, kind of going a little bit in a circle here, but you put in what you know you need into the AI, spits it out. Then as a human with the lived experiences, I need to take time and fill that framework in. Then I use the AI again. So the AI is kind of the bread, I'm the meat, the tomato, and the cheese. And then I bring the AI in again to complete the sandwich. The last piece of the AI is important for me because it helps me to translate what I've just built and translate it for the executive, because the executive needs high level picture, but it needs to understand the bottom line. My direct leader needs to understand one more level of detail. My team needs to know in detail what exactly goes into this whole sandwich. And then everybody else at the organization just needs to know maybe similar level to the board or the executive, but it's still a different flavor. And so doing all that used to take a lot of time for me. I'd create multiple slide decks, Google Docs, narratives to like make sure everybody understood. But with this AI sandwich method, the AI gives me the framework. I fill in the middle, and then the AI translates it to me for the different audiences that I need to present this to.
Yeah, I love that approach. Like for us at MarketCraft, we use GPTs all the time, and I always explain to the team that like aside from it's called prompt engineering, but I think a better way to put it is that it's context engineering, right? Giving like really deep and solid context to the AI, but that to understand that like these things do hallucinate and they'll make some stuff up, and so it's very important to kind of go through and use it, not use the AI as a crutch, but more again like a tool, right? Where you go back through and refine things. And even who was it? Just to add some data to it, I can't remember the amount, but it was huge. Neil Patel and his agency, they do massive like studies and everything. And in their like SEO studies, they found that like the best SEO blogs that performed wasn't just AI alone or human alone. It was kind of a combo of like you use the AI to get started or to generate some ideas. You fill in a large amount of it, but then the AI goes back through and helps like really refine it down. I guess similar to your AI sandwich method, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's very important to understand like these are the ways to use it versus like, again, I think that a lot of marketers, the way they are using it is not providing like good enough context and then just doing sort of a straight copy paste. And this is where you see like what's called like a lot of AI slop online content, but then also on the back end, like for presentations, like, I would imagine that there's a lot of AI slop there.
Yeah. And kind of to bring this back to Showpad and why the platform play works so well for us is the context. We are a bit of a household name when it comes to content management for enterprise sales companies. Sales companies or enterprise companies upload all their sales collateral into Showpad, and they enable their field sellers out in the field to access it online or offline. And with all of that context, understanding what sales collateral is being used, what is being used and opening up opportunities and closing deals, that type of context now leads to next best actions for the sellers in the field. Additionally, when we have our AI coaching and AI role playing, it takes into account all the content that the seller is using, not using, the buyer is consuming and not consuming to make the role play as real as possible. A lot of AI role play technology out there just mimics what a person in a particular job title or role might say. But context, like you just mentioned, is key. And Showpad has all that context because sellers are using the tool to say, hey, I just shared this piece of collateral with a clinician. He or she asked this question back. I addressed it and it led to an opportunity. That type of context now feeds back into the platform to train the sellers to lead to the faster onboarding, the higher quota attainment, the higher win rate. So context, in this case, your GPT usage, my GPT usage, but also just like an enablement and sales effectiveness platform is key.
Yeah, and I'm happy you mentioned that because, like, again, I think the key within our industry is like really pulling the right levers to increase pipeline velocity. So the moment a warm lead from a conference or let's say inbound on the website turns into like, something of interest, I feel like there needs to be some way, and this is why, again, I really like Showpad. That's why I wanted to partner with you guys, is that to essentially have all your sales tools, assets, etc. in one place. You allow all the field sellers to start using it however they want. Hopefully you have some kind of best practice of like, hey, when you first engage a physician and you're trying to get them in a demo, you send them this piece of collateral. On the demo, that you show them this. Post demo, when you're going through value analysis committee, these are the things you use. At some point, you're going to have to run this experiment for at least like maybe a quarter or two so you can get some data in. But at that point, you have something like Showpad Assist working in the background to start identifying like the deals that did really well, they all had this common theme. And now as a marketer, now you can go back and tweak and say, okay, like 30% of the deals, they use these pieces of collateral. The other ones use this. So then maybe in Q3 or Q4, or even in the following year, You say, okay, we're going to roll out at our annual sales meeting. This is like the process. Okay. We know that like 90% of these deals that close, they all started with asking for these pieces of collateral. So rather than going in blindly and waiting for, let's say, post demo, a few days later that physician is going to ask for a piece of collateral, it's either shown right there in the demo or sent to them immediately afterwards. Like and again, this is where the compound effect starts working in your favor. Because like, if it's just, let's say, a 2-3 day delay of asking for that collateral, you've eliminated those 2-3 days. And imagine that compounding across like multiple deals, and you find like 2 or 3 of these things. I feel like that's the key to where you start moving the needle in these small areas. And now your average deal length could be reduced from, let's say, I don't know, like 60, 90 days to maybe 30 days to go from, like, let's say, a demo to a value analysis committee. I just feel like there's not enough emphasis, Moon, on this concept of that kind of like, everything I feel can be explained through physics, right? So in a physics experiment, if you're shooting like a trajectory and you have it at like 45 degrees, right? It'll go a certain distance, have a certain trajectory. But if you just change it by 1 degree, its trajectory and how far it goes and where it's going, it's like radically different.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like there's so many of these things in the go-to-market motion that can be solved just by the pieces of content that are changed and adapted. And you only do that through data. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's actually a great point, because one of the things that I really love about Showpad Assist is, let's say you and I have a meeting today, and you say, hey, great meeting. Next meeting, let's follow up with XYZ content or pieces of collateral. I say, sure. The AI will capture all of that and create the next steps for me. And then on my calendar for our next call, there will be our meeting. And then right next to it, Showpad Assist will create another event for me. When I click on that event, it's notes from our previous call and all the links to the assets that we talked about me delivering. So it's preparing me for that next call. But to your point, why wait to deliver it on the next call? If the AI has already consolidated everything for me, me as a seller, maybe I can shorten the sales cycle or increase the deal velocity by saying, hey, I know I'm meeting with Omar in 2 days, but the AI has already got me the content. Let me prime him up and say, here's the content. Let's dive in more on the next call. I think, to your point, that's like perfect. It's maybe there's something there for our product teams to like say, hey, the calendar invite is there, but maybe the notification trigger needs to happen 24 hours before something.
And look, like, I'll say, like, even in my organization, when we look at like how we accelerate like pipeline, like at this point, we've sold to enough companies on the agency side. That is, we know very well like what questions they have coming into that meeting. What are they going to ask afterwards? And so it's like, okay, let's just get this to them as quickly as possible.
Sure.
And I think for a lot of sellers, like at least when they sell to a surgeon, getting a surgeon to carve out 30 minutes of their time is really, really tough. And so what often happens is that a seller gets on and they'll go through the same presentation they give to everybody else, which they feel good about doing that. But then the thing that always ends up happening is that you don't have enough time at the end for Q&A, right? And then, you kind of like rush through and it's like, oh, I'll have a follow-up. So it's kind of like, well, how do you eliminate that ahead of time so that way that 30 minutes you have with a surgeon is like very high level, answering the questions that how do we get this into your hospital and adopted? And I feel like that's the only way you get there is by having your content all in one place. And more importantly, having AI in the background silently working to figure out what pieces of content. Like, I'll give you one thing that I would love somebody, by the way, if you're a marketer and you adopt Showpad and you do this, like, I'll have you on the show to talk about this. But like, for example, too many companies, what they'll do is they'll have a product brochure, right? Or a product like PDF, and it's like 10 pages long, right? And the problem with that is that you have all this content in one place, and yet you kind of don't know, unless you're tracking it manually, where's somebody spending the most time on the content? Like, are they spending more on the economic side, on the clinical studies, etc.? And what I would say is like, take that 10-page like product brochure, break it up into 5 or 6 or 7 different assets, which let's say it's like one is on clinical stuff, one is on economics and reimbursement, the other one is on who knows what it is. Put that into Showpad, and you send that, and you send those pieces out. Then you start getting a really good idea of like, oh, prior to us having intro calls, like most of the time, most of these like prospects we have, they're all like looking at these 2 or 3 pieces of content. Well, now you've identified like, okay, before a demo, these are the 3 pieces of content you send out. And that way you sort of optimize the chances that like, if those are the most important pieces going into a demo, that you get the prospect to focus and choose reading those 3 versus originally in your experiment, you're sending out 5 or 7 to kind of see what happens.
You would really crush selling Showpad here because that's exactly how it works. We on the marketing side, we obviously upload the collateral for the sellers to use. The sellers can do what you just explained, but we also have analytics to see time on page, where the drop off is, which page of the PDF the drop off is, so that the marketing can go back in and say, hey, you know what? A lot of people are dropping off on this page. Let's move it up so that they get it first, right? Something about this page is losing them. So maybe so we'll put it up front or put it last or whatever. That gives us the data. And then when marketing uploads it, sellers don't have to do anything because version control for marketing is super easy. We just upload the new version. It says a version updated at this date. So the sellers now have this behavioral change of, hey, I'm not going to save this asset on my machine anymore. I know a lot of sellers like to do that. You can see the latest version.
And, so the thing that I love about that, and I feel like you guys should come up with some term for this, but essentially it's taking what digital marketers have done for the last 2 or 3 decades of optimizing landing pages and everything, but doing it now specifically for content. Again, at the end of the day, whether it's a landing page, social media, a PDF, it's all content. And the idea is how do we make sure that the person who's receiving this content is consuming it and it's doing the thing it's supposed to do, which is persuading them to a next action, right? And so a lot of times, I think that's such an important thing, which is in the medical device world, medtech, tech med, whatever you want to call it, so much of the business is essentially done through emails and sending content. That I think that's the most important thing to do, right? Which is start not only testing the pieces of content, but to understand if this is an area where people are dropping off or spending time on, then maybe, just rearranging the content or dividing it up is going to be, again, more importantly, having that downstream effect on the sellers. And then there's a compound effect to that.
Yeah. And the piece too that a lot of people maybe that are listening or thinking is well, that's a lot of work for the sellers. The beauty of all this, and I've mentioned this phrase before, the winning locker room mentality or building a winning locker room. The beauty of it is with all the context that lives inside of your Showpad instance, your organization has access to all of it at scale. So if you're a seller and you're crushing it, I don't need to now knock on your door and ask you what you're doing that's different. I can see that. And all the things that you use will be surfaced up for the other members of your team. And that is what helps overall quota attainment for the entire team. A lot of companies, we've seen data too, a lot of companies have 1 or 2 salespeople that crush the quota to get the entire team over the hump quarter after quarter, year over year. That's not good business, right? That's a little stressful. What you want is a winning locker room. You want everybody to attain data. You don't want 1 or 2 salesperson to hit 200, 300%. That's unsustainable, in my opinion. What you want
and it's a risk to the business, by the way, too.
Yeah, and I think you were the one that mentioned this to me, that what actually happens to the seller that crushes it? They're rewarded, yes, financially, but ultimately they're punished by giving a wider territory. And now they have more work to do and more selling. And selling the traditional way is more research, more prepping, more chasing people down, more updating CRMs. That's a bit of a punishment. And so the ethos of Showpad again and the Showpad Assist is your seller that is crushing it. One, analytics will tell you exactly what they're doing for them to hit their number consistently. So the other members of the team can understand how to mimic that or understand the next best actions for their own accounts. But additionally, with Showpad Assist, that seller now that gets a wider territory does less admin work because the AI is working smartly in the background for them, updating the CRM, updating every conversation, recommending the pieces of asset. And so now you have sellers that have expanded territory with more accounts that are able to actually scale what they do best, which is sell. Less admin work and actually selling.
And I think that, for the modern marketing leader these days, we had talked about this before, is that essentially you're crafting and engineering a growth loop between the user experience of the content and then using the data just as a feedback mechanism to constantly revise and improve on that UX, not just on the content, but the flow of it in terms of what's done pre-meeting, during meeting, post-meeting, etc.
Totally. I think if CRMs are used properly, they're good. I would say there's a very, very small percentage of teams that are using it properly though, right? And so again, kind of going back to Showpad and Showpad Assist is when a deal hits a certain stage in Salesforce, again, a very smart, quiet, intelligent AI that works in the background will automate the Salesforce CRM records to indicate what was used, what was said, what wasn't for each funnel stage. If you have enough aggregate data, kind of going back to the data and understanding the data, if you have enough of those, you understand what things are being done and not done for deal velocity to increase. What is being said by Omar and the other reps that are crushing it to allow opportunities to go from stage 2 to 3 faster than the average of everybody else. Now you take that insight and say, in Showpad, there's the landing page that says, here's the key asset to use in Salesforce stage 2 to get them into the next stage. So just that context, we keep coming back to context. It's like that context is key. The next best action, which is fed by the context, is key. And then everything, all that's happening in the background cannot be done by a human. It's just not enough hours in the day. And so intelligent, trusted AI to do this in the background is also key.
Yeah, we talked about this, Chris from Showpad and I, when we did that webinar, we talked about this, about AI quietly working in the background. I think the other side that people haven't spoken enough about, and again, this is where like I really love how Showpad and then Showpad Assist elevates the seller, right? Or whether it's a capital sales rep or implant or anything else, because that process of selling to a surgeon or a hospital admin and everything, that's a product in itself. And so like I've experienced this in my own organization, like with something as simple as like I have an AI note taker, we have a GPT, and sometimes when it comes to answering certain things, like, we'll use that, right, in follow-up. I feel like with Showpad Assist working quietly in the background to identify things that are mentioned in the meeting, pulling up the right pieces of content, and then the seller following up and say, hey, Dr. So-and-so, it was great having that demo. Here are the things we covered. You asked these specific questions. I want to provide like some context so that you can use it, because that physician is going to either go talk to their partners or go talk to the hospital admin. And so if you give them this email that's very deep in terms of the things that they need, right, it just makes the process so much easier. Versus a lot of times, like I think a seller, like, they'll go and do a demo of the product. The surgeon's like excited, like, oh, this is great. Seller sends them this like email with like all kinds of random PDFs and everything. And now they're putting it on the surgeon to figure out like what should they forward on to who and what should they sell. And, and you don't want to do that. You want to make it as like seamless of a process as possible for that surgeon or hospital admin to get more buy-in from the organization,
Totally. Yeah. And it comes down to user experience, right? For the surgeon, that's bad user experience. Like, and there's a saying that says good UX goes unnoticed. When a sales rep is able to send that surgeon exact pieces of asset or exact answer to the question that they answered, the surgeon takes that, consumes that information, and thinks, great, done, perfect. That good user experience goes unnoticed until what you just described, when the seller decides, hey, this person's going to want to know this, that, and the other, and he'll figure out what's important to him. That overwhelming bombardment of content is an absolute, I would call a deal killer, not even a staller. That overwhelming, that paralysis by analysis, like that doesn't do anything but stall a deal, in my opinion.
I know, I completely agree. If buying something feels like more work, people just aren't going to do it. Especially, I think in the B2B context. In the B2C context, it's for yourself, right? But in the B2B context, it's like more work. And so sometimes just, and this is where I think like in our industry, there's too much of a focus of just like pressure sales, like constant follow up and making it important and that timelines and everything. And a lot of times that just like makes the buying process really, really miserable. And this is where like people get ghosted,
Yeah. I don't know, man. It's like with technology these days, sales, there's so much sales tech out there, and the sales tech optimizes for one thing only, and it's scale, but it allows them to scale really poor experiences across the board. I get hit up with sales pitches of random things, and the content, they try to throw so much content into one email, so much content into one LinkedIn, so much more. It's just like I'm overwhelmed. But if they were able to break through the noise and say, hey, Moon, I know you care about this. Here's the answer. What do you think? Let's like give me one thing at a time. You're busy. I'm busy. If I have one less PDF to read, I'd be a happy man. And I think like overall, everyone needs to start thinking about what's the user experience I'm promoting or delivering to the buyer. And like, I think everything will be better.
And so I have a little bit of a curveball to ask you, just because one, I'm genuinely curious, but also a lot of the listeners of this show, aside from like, large strategics, we're talking about Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies, a lot of them are like startup to mid caps. And so for at least my experience, like we always recommend as a CRM, like using HubSpot, and HubSpot has like an area where you can upload documents. So like, how does it work with a company who has like HubSpot as a CRM and you decide to adopt Showpad, like what does that kind of workflow sort of look like, and what's sort of the best practice you recommend?
Yeah, I don't think the CRM necessarily matters. It's really, again, the context, right? Like all the context that's in there, can it pipe into Showpad? So we do have integrations to all the major CRMs, and it's not like we can't customize our instance to your customized HubSpot or customized Salesforce. So, I can't speak too much to the technical side, but there are direct integrations that can feed into Showpad.
Would you say then, like, at least the way that I see Showpad as a tool is like your CRM is essentially a source of truth in terms of data and contacts for the organization in some period of time. But in order to actually make the CRM more effective and look better month over month, quarter over quarter, Showpad is essentially that platform and tool where if the CRM's capturing this information in real time and pulling in data and everything, then Showpad's actually the tool that allows you to say, okay, like if our average deal cycle is like 95 days, right? Showpad gives you sort of the qualitative and quantitative data and the UX to say, okay, like here are the levers we're going to like test and play with to try and shorten that cycle from like 95 days to, let's say, let's put a goal of like 60 days.
Correct. Yeah. And now with Showpad Assist, it will write or update your CRM records. So I know a lot of organizations, us included, no one's Salesforce or CRM data is clean. Now you can start that motion of cleaning things up. And moving forward, as long as all those connections are made, you will give your CRM the right context to help build that compounding effect of better, cleaner data that leads to better, cleaner insights for better next best actions for your other deals.
I'm also wondering, again, like jumping on tangent here, but like what about like training? Training is a very, very important aspect of our industry. One thing that doesn't happen enough, believe it or not, is that like the sales training that happens, majority of it is actually like clinical, not actual sales training, which is that's a whole other topic. But like, how do you think about like the way Showpad is essentially used for like a training organization as they roll things out to the sales team?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of our bread and butter too. As far as going to, I mentioned we're a household name for content management. For medtech companies, I'm sure you're aware, you cannot misspeak when you're representing a product or, sharing a spec sheet. And so the context that you give it, the right updated, compliant asset, now you can turn into AI role playing, AI coaching moments. And those coaching moments, a lot of companies say, hey, here's your quarterly training. Go take the thing. When it's done, you got a certification. We'll call it done. These are like training moments that happen when you need it, right when you need it, right where you need it to. So you just get off a call, you're in Showpad, the call didn't go too well, and this AI role play now will take the role of the individual that you spoke to, and you can train yourself now and get a real grade that actually matters, not binary done or not done. And so I think, again, going back to the context, super important to make sure that the role-playing app that you have has the right context to train the sellers on the things that are actually going to move the needle.
And
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, totally. And then like on that note, like role playing, like tell me what is that like? I haven't seen that yet, but like what does that look like within Showpad, like the actual role playing? When you say role playing with AI, some people are going to think different things. So you can be a little bit more specific about it.
Yeah. So I'll share a link with you right after, but this is part of the merger, and this is why I was so excited about our merger with Big Team Can. But it's actually an avatar. So you feed it the context, and you'll have an avatar that you can speak to and get real-time feedback as if, it's a little creepy, but it's like as if I'm talking to you and you give me feedback. I say something, it's like, well, that doesn't make sense. Tell me more about this and that. And then that's all recorded. It gives you, real-time feedback. It gives you a grade at the end. So again, certifications, the courses that you take in the past that were just binary, like did you do it or you did not? Now it's way more. It's no longer black and white. There's all the grays in between to help sellers increase their efficiency across the board.
Yeah, and I think that's important too, because again, like the way that most training that happens in our industry goes down is that salespeople get hired. They go to like it's usually like a 3 to 5 day like sales training workshop, most of which is just focused on like the clinical aspect and the technical aspect of the product. They do some role play there, and then they go out and they're expected to sell, and then that's it. Like there's no like ongoing education, training, best practices, etc. Maybe they get back together like at the end of the quarter, kind of review the deals, but then that's about it. And that's why I think there's like such a huge delta between people who are like surpassing quota and then everybody else.
Yeah, and I think that's also the challenge of a growing organization where you just hire more people, but you have one manager that is expected to coach and level up the entire team. How many
That's
hours in it?
impossible.
Exactly. So that's the key to the AI role playing too for sales managers, real-time coaching insights so you understand what part of the talk track needs the most amount of support. Your entire team's readiness analytics at your fingertips. And so now the managers can feed again the right context into the training materials along with their enablement teams to make sure that the sellers are leveled up all the same way. We see this in sports too. Some, we'll talk about kid sports. Some kids have a really wicked jump shot and they don't need to work on their jump shot, but the other kids don't have that same skill. And if you don't do enough drills, they're falling behind. Same thing here. To build that winning locker room mentality and the performance of one, can't do blanket training across the board. You need individualized, data driven, real time training to get everyone elevated. So everyone hits quota. And now your organization is crushing quota, not just through one or two sellers, but with everybody carrying their weight. And when you scale, you add one, two more headcount. You don't need to do it slowly. A lot of companies are afraid to hire fast because they know onboarding training is going to be a challenge. But now you can afford to maybe 2x your sales team. You just got funding. Why are you going to slow down your growth, right? You can 2x your sales team and know that the onboarding is 40% faster. Your sales team is not going to miss their quota because you are spending extra time with the new hire. So it's the numbers kind of speak for themselves.
Yeah, and I think what's also important to consider is that, again, going back to this concept of like, you can't scale complex systems, right? You have to have like some foundation that makes sense to scale. The other side of it is that for a lot of companies who are listening that are generating revenue, and let's say they're in the 10, 20 million, annual revenue track, right? As they get more in injection of capital, or even let's say they get to a point of an acquisition, a lot of the acquisitions now, they'll have certain amount they're getting bought out for, but then they'll have like milestones to hit, right? And so in order for those milestones to hit, you're like integrating with another team. It makes a lot more sense where at that point you've had enough data accumulate where you kind of have a really good idea of like, this is essentially what the whole sales process looks like. And these are the different pieces of content. These are the emails. These are the things that we use to move a deal through a cycle. So then as you add more sellers in, you get plugged into a system. Versus like nowadays, every time a seller's being added, it's like, okay, they're plugged in, they have a territory, now they just go hit the street. And now like you have no idea like what's happening with one deal versus another, And so it's like it just doesn't make sense at all. But our industry has just like gone through this for so long. And now like we're in this period where I feel like in the last like 5 to 10 years, we've really left that area because it used to be that you just sell to like one or two surgeons. They're the sort of decision makers. You're done. You move on to the next thing. But now the sale is like so much more complex, right? There's so many different parties involved.
Yeah, the thing is like sales has always been complex. I think what's added to the complexity is all the technology that we have and all the information that is readily created. We just create things and then send it off to the buyer to say, hey, buyer, read this stuff. It's really exciting. I promise you. And then the sellers hope that they do, and then it is exciting. And so sales has always been a tough role. It's just there's so much technology out there because there's so many sellers out there that are struggling with the same things, human connection, understanding context into winning deals and how to scale that. There's just so much technology out there that creates disparate experiences for sellers. And yeah, it's a tough one. Sellers are in a tough role. Selling is tough. And now their leadership is buying tools that don't talk to each other, and now they're expected to learn and onboard themselves on these tools too. One thing that was interesting.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, I was going to say one of the things that was interesting. We did a study with some of our manufacturing companies and Medtech included of their AI adoption and the ROI they're getting from these AI tools. We're seeing that about 76% of these enterprise organizations have adopted AI. And I say these in air quotes for the people that aren't watching, because it's like, oh yeah, we use Gemini or we use this. That's not really adoption. Well, we see that only 17% of companies that have truly adopted AI are seeing return on investments. So everyone is just playing with AI, but only a very select few are actually winning with AI. And so I think there's, again, because there's so many salespeople out there, all these software companies realize there's so much money to be made, and they are justifying their existence by saying, salespeople, you have this problem, we can solve for it. But the biggest challenge of sales of all is that they have too many disparate places for everything: coaching, content, picking up the phone to call somebody. Do you call people now? Do you text them? Do you WhatsApp them? Like, the world has gotten more complex, and the sales motion is complex as a result. And the technology that is in their faces that don't actually help even add more complexity. So it's a really interesting study that we did, and I'll send you a link to the report, and maybe we can share it with the folks here. But just like so many companies, 76% of these enterprise companies saying they adopted AI, but only 17% actually seeing true ROI. It's kind of crazy. They're just burning money at that point, right?
I know, I completely agree, and I feel like the I think you'll get a kick out of this, but like I would say the B2B SaaS revolution started like, let's say like conservative, like 15 years ago. So like 2010, it was when it was really a thing. And then over time, there was this kind of this, I like to call it like the SaaS industrial complex, which is like all this software, all this stuff being adopted that, depending on the industry you're in, it literally created like careers and like whole industries just to make this all like connect and make sense. And now I think we're entering that same thing where, no doubt B2B SaaS made B2B, doing B2B business much, much better. Like the HubSpots, the Salesforces of the world, et cetera, Showpad, it made things a lot better. Now we're entering that same area with AI where they're just like, people are just adopting this left and right, but they're not actually leveraging it and getting the most value out of it. Because I think, again, like the tool is only as good as the user who's using it, just like with AI.
Yeah, I've said this to you too. I think we were definitely offline, but a lot of these software companies are trying to create a problem to justify their existence. A lot of these problems, especially B2C software, it's like,
totally. Some of these attribution reports.
yeah, let's not get started on attribution. I don't think we have enough time for that.
No, I completely agree. No, I totally agree. No, so, and what I was going to say is that I think what's exciting is that, like, for me, I was actually the very first, like, growth marketer, head of growth in the medical device industry, like almost 10 years ago now, when nobody knew what that was. My whole thing was that being in growth meant that you actually had true influence on pipeline and deals, right? The things that actually make the company money. And I think now, with, things like Showpad that are, again, working the background, a marketing leader and a sales leader can kind of look and see like what pieces of content, what sales assets are actually working, and how do we optimize them, and what kind of effect does it have on a compounding manner to the rest of the organization for like deal flow and deal close rate and everything. I think that's sort of like the really exciting thing. Like marketers for the longest time had this opportunity with landing pages and social media. It's like, okay, are we getting people to click in? Are we driving more traffic and conversions? But now the big thing, and I think that's where the money is how do you actually influence the things that are within pipeline, and not just saying, okay, it's on the sales. Because I think for the longest time, a lot of people in Medtech, the marketers were like, okay, well, we're getting leads and we're getting deals, but like the sellers suck, or this seller doesn't know what they're doing. And it's just like not, and maybe that's the case, but it's just like not going to fix the problem. Like you can't like raise money or go to an acquisition and just say like, oh, like we would have sold more, but like our sellers suck, like that's just not how it works.
Yeah. And I think that is the byproduct of misalignment between sales and marketing. Marketers on their own have decided, hey, we're going to focus on this part of the funnel. Sales, you own that part. Not realizing a seller doesn't have enough hours in the day to speak to the buyer and build confidence and share social proof and get case studies in front of them to actually understand that there's going to be ROI at the end of this stuff. That's the marketing. Marketing should be responsible for the full life cycle, including when opportunities are open, even at late stage. I mean, I would argue maybe, you know what? I'm not going to be a hypocrite. I will say a lot more marketers, including myself, should focus post-close too. Even after the signature, there's still work to be done for a marketer to educate them, continue to instill confidence that like even during the onboarding process, the implementation process may be a little bit challenging now, but don't look elsewhere. Dig in. This is what you need, and this is what you're going to use to grow your organization. 6 months in, 6 months before the annual contract is up, you should start to show them quotes from customers, case studies from like industry companies to help them like, hey, we're coming up on renewal. Is this a thing we're going to need to cut or not? Right? That is all on marketing too. If you end up with a list of, let's say, big deals that are coming up on renewal in the next 3 months, I'd say you're putting marketing in a really difficult space, because to try to minimize churn and protect against churn against accounts that you haven't talked to outside of the account manager, that's a really difficult job for the marketing. But again, this comes down to a handshake agreement between marketing and sales that says, hey, marketing, you need to own the entire funnel. Taper off your work on customers, but we still need your support.
No, I completely agree. And again, like, this is why I'm very biased with marketing. For those who listen, just so you don't know, if you did not know this, Intuitive, who's by all accounts and measures one of the most successful med device, med tech companies out there, almost at a $200 billion market cap. Their early days, they were a marketing-led organization. Marketing dictated everything. And I think the other side of it is that in the SaaS world, we talk about it as churn. In our industry, it's a lot about utilization, that once a product is placed, you do have to focus on customer success and like driving as maximum amount of utilization as possible. Because again, in your valuations, whether it's for an acquisition or to raise money, like that gets taken into account. If those utilization numbers start to go down, or if another product comes out that's more competitive, like you'll lose customers that way. You can't just assume that once you sold and placed your product that you're good. And again, the main point is that on one side, marketing has gotten way more difficult and more complex, but the other side is that marketing has this phenomenal opportunity to have so much more relevancy and, more importantly, influence within the C-suite than ever. Like, people can make phenomenal careers if they sort of really lean into terms of adopting tools like this, and then understanding, like, how do we actually implement and influence these things? This is one of the reasons why I went into marketing myself a long time ago, because I was like, okay, this is the thing that actually has influence on the direction of the organization. And if you build a really good career around that, you'll get calls from all kinds of people saying, hey, we just invested in this company. Can you come in and actually implement the systems and figure out what levers we got to pull to make this like a $1 billion company?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's one thing too that I'm starting to see a lot of within like heavy manufacturing. Also very complex multi-role selling motion. They're no longer about selling physical goods. They are expanding towards services on top, recurring revenue models. And that is what a lot of companies are trying to do to not just increase revenue, but also to survive in a lot of cases too. And so one of the things at Showpad we do a good job of arming sellers to do is, hey, you don't want to just be a catalog seller. You don't want to just sell the thing that is the physical product, sign the check, and then move on. You want to be able to tack on services on top of that, and the coaching, the training, the collateral that comes along with your already refined physical goods selling motion has been key to an unlock for sellers that were phenomenal at just selling the product, can now have the mobility and the flexibility to take the knowledge that they have and the experience and whatever it is that they do to sell, now tack on additional revenue for the organization and kind of pad their commission checks at the same time too. So it's been great.
I love that. So I have one last question for you before we wrap up, kind of a fun one. But for those who are interested, again, like, check the show notes below for some of the links that Mood's going to share with us. Again, Showpad is a beloved partner of ours. You can learn more about what they're doing for Medtech and see a lot of like great Medtech companies that have adopted Showpad. Just go to showpad.com/state of Medtech. Or if you want like a personal introduction, like, you shoot me a DM on LinkedIn and I'll get you connected to Chris, who leads the enterprise team for Medtech. But Moon, last thing is that part of being a great B2B leader, definitely being a marketer, I think, is like continuous education. And I'm wondering, like, what kind of books like had an influence on your career, and what kind of things do you like to sort of use to kind of keep up with things these days? Whether it's podcasts, there's a lot of garbage marketing content out there. By the way, we've talked a lot about that offline, but like maybe some books for some of the like younger aspiring. There's a lot of like aspiring growth marketers in our space that just really want to get into it. So like, what would you recommend?
Look, this might not be what you were looking to hear, but I don't subscribe to a lot of those things. I mean, I've read some good books about marketing. I would say the one that comes to mind is Outliers. Probably you get a lot of marketers that say this, Outliers.
No.
But well, I just like the ability to think outside of the box in whatever thing I do. I don't like when people talk about B2B marketing as just B2B marketing. It's just marketing. And I think marketing, when you strip down all the things that make up B2B marketing, growth marketer, performance marketer, whatever it is, marketers are really all about storytelling and offering the greatest experience. And that doesn't come really from a textbook. It comes with doing things like this, you and me having a chat. I've met people at a bar in New York City that were users of our software. Just like having that conversation, the serendipity to meet somebody that's sitting in a bar that's using our software and understanding like, what made you buy this? Where did you see us? What's your biggest pain point? Like that is great. But also, I have a lot of friends that are not in marketing, that are not in tech, that I ask a lot of questions like, hey, how did you hear about this company? I was just having a conversation with a friend who doesn't use Venmo and uses Zelle instead. Do you guys use Venmo out in the West Coast? Yeah, you do, right?
Venmo, Zelle, yes.
Okay. Well, Venmo is huge. Like everyone's like Venmo me. But then all of a sudden, these guys are like using Zelle. I'm like, what made you want to use Zelle? And it's little moments like that I think, as much as I hate to say I'm working all the time, I take little bits from conversations, movies, every little moment that I have to try to take into what is a narrative I can tell in my B2B 9 to 5.
I love that you said that again. Like I love books. Of course, people can ask me about certain books or of marketing because I can make recommendations. But I feel like part of being a great marketer is that you have to be thinking about this stuff all the time. So I'm very much in the same line. Like for example, like I got like the Robb Report. So like for those who don't know, Robb Report is essentially a magazine that sells like super wealthy rich people stuff. And I part of the reason why I got it is because I want to see like, how do certain industries like luxury position their products? How do they copyright? How do they what kind of language do they use, right? And I think it's really good when you have that filter on to sort of like be curious and like learn from other industries. That's where you get like the best kind of insights and you bring them into your space and then, leverage it. I think it's really important to do that. And I think if you're not willing to do that, you're not going to be like sort of a one of one in your career, right? Which is okay. Some people just want to like have a regular career and phone it in. But if you want to like really attain a certain level of career success, financial success, etc., you got to be, I think, a little psychotic is maybe not the right word, but like you got to be obsessive. You got to be kind of obsessive about these things.
Yeah, you know what it is too. I think you can compartmentalize work in life. I think a lot of people do that, and that's fine. I think I like to think about my job and what I do, during 9 to 5. Outside of my 9 to 5, because I want to bring all the little joys from outside of work into work. And so if I'm creating a LinkedIn ad and testing a headline, maybe the headline is based on something that I overheard on the subway or somebody talking a certain way or a tagline, or I think that makes my job a little bit more enjoyable because I can sprinkle in the little fun bits that I experience when I'm not working.
I love it. Well, Moon, thank you so much for coming on the show. You probably can hear him, but my son's in the background, so I had to take him to jiu-jitsu, but I had a blast, as always. For those who are interested, again, go to showpad.com/State of Medtech to learn more. If you enjoyed this episode, send this on to an investor. A lot of investors are trying to learn more about better marketing. More importantly, send this on to another commercial leader, sales leader. And as always, we'll see you all next time. Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who would really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.